Hey everyone!
Hey.
Happy Wednesday. We're so glad you're joining us again for the last one in our series of helping dads in different ways to be equipped with more tools for their fathering toolbox so that you can dial into the heart space of your daughter.
Okay,
Here
I'm
we go.
so pumped up.
Well, tonight the topic is Dad, lead your daughter to
Listen.
listen.
Very important.
And we talked last week, Ken really kind of laid that out about how you as a dad can listen to your daughter, but that's not the topic we're covering tonight. We're talking about how you can actually be the one to listen as your daughter asks you questions about your life and she learns to listen
Yes.
by hearing you tell your story. So this is going to be a whole different topic on leading her to listen that we've covered before.
Right. And the way that you've positioned it is flipping the script. Talk about that in just a moment.
Right. So all the way up till now in the book, Let's Talk, you give your daughter permission to open up to you, right? So you have the script in front of you. This flips the script where you hand your daughter the book and you let her ask you questions.
Here it is.
About your relationships with your parents. She gets to ask you questions about your romantic history and choices that you've made and about God and all kinds of funny and funky things.
Yes.
Depending on how you want to look at it.
And some of the dumb stuff you did.
There you go. No, not that anyone listening would have ever made
Absolutely.
stupid mistakes.
Not a chance. This guy
Hypothetically.
hasn't. So Michelle sets the stage here, I think, just succinctly when she says this. Your goal, Dad, or in my place, your goal, Ken, is to facilitate the activation of your daughter's voice by letting her ask you questions about your life as she hones her ability to listen intently. And further, you say, your daughter will be inspired when hearing about obstacles you have overcome to get where you are today, which gives her more freedom to tell you what's going on in her life. That's what we want.
It's true.
As well as helping her strengthen her interpersonal skills. True listening has become a lost art in this fast-paced, distraction-driven, technology-laden age. And who better than you for your daughter to practice the art of talking and listening? And that's the core of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, because really the truth is you may be a dad that says, I don't want my daughter making my same mistakes.
Of course.
Or I don't want her to justify her decisions or her behavior because she'll say, well, Dad, you did the same thing.
Yes.
And I think sometimes dads hold back on being too real because of that exact reality, right?
For sure.
And so oftentimes out of that fear, you will hold back. But I got to tell you, that isn't really what it's like. I would say for most women, I know I speak for myself, where it's more that I get to hear, honestly, even what you've learned out of the mistakes you've made. We're not expecting you never to have made mistakes as a parent, as a dad. But when you open up, I think it does a couple of things. I think it helps you as a dad remember back to what it was like when you were her age. Maybe by the time of 40, 50, 60, you have forgotten maybe that you were a young lad who made stupid decisions at one point.
You've suppressed that stuff.
Yeah, you've suppressed.
You don't want to visit it again.
You've put it in the vault, in the archives, because you don't want to revisit that.
Yes.
And yet when you bring those stories forward,
For sure.
I guarantee you're going to have more grace for your daughter. And really it's going to help you build a bridge to her heart because she's going to remember and you're going to remember that you weren't perfect at that age. You're not perfect now. And that really it's all about all of us learning, sometimes the hard way, but in process. So those are key things to remember.
You know, this brings to mind what Winston Churchill did. You know, when things were really tough, he put this, V is for victory. You know what the V is in this relationship? Vulnerability. When you are vulnerable, there's going to be a change. And I believe that change comes when you're open. Now, one of the things to be careful of and wise about is the age appropriateness of what you're going to share. For instance, you don't want to share with your 2-year-old daughter some of your escapades in high school. Don't go there.
But truth be told, even some dads don't want to tell their high school daughter about their escapades in high school.
Agreed. Yeah. But there comes a time and place where your disclosure is going to be healthy and helpful in the past, in the present, and in your future relationship. Now, word of caution, if your daughter has experienced, let's say, the separation or divorce in your life, don't put her in a middle position. In other words, friendly fire can be, devastating. And so you never want to undo something that is so key to her life, that relationship to her mother, regardless of what her mother has done or regardless of what you have done. So be careful
Yes.
not to triangulate. This is just between you and her,
Mhm.
you sharing your life.
Well, another piece I want to add to that, Ken, is that when you put your daughter in the middle in a divorce
Mm-hmm.
or with any kind of, I would say, relational struggle, it might even be with a sibling or with someone else in your family or outside your family, is then your daughter internalizes, as I said earlier, a lot of that. And if you put down her mama, she will indirectly believe you're putting her down because that's her DNA.
Oh.
So if you're saying something negative about her mom,
yes, half of her DNA comes from her mother.
yeah, she isn't going to want to keep opening up with you because then she gets that kind of a message and it's too much for her to carry.
And even if it's true, this is not the time or place because we're building the resiliency, and we'll talk about that in your daughter's life.
Yeah, exactly. So I just shared a little bit about why I don't think men want to open up. Maybe, they don't want their daughter to repeat their mistake, or maybe it's their own insecurity. Maybe they haven't worked it through.
Of course.
Right? And so maybe it's that you're still wounded over some of those things in your past and you don't want to open it up because it smarts a bit. I mean, what do you think is some of the reasons that men hold back?
Well, I think there's this trepidation, this sense that if I tell her what I did, got 3 DUIs in high school and college, that she is going to not be wise about drinking and driving. And there are much more serious things. But let me tell you this. What you can do, whatever story you share or whatever, you're going to just lay out there in a vulnerable way, it can be framed in a positive way. And this is what they have found in building resiliency in young teens and early young adults.
I love that word, resiliency.
Yes.
Say more about it.
Okay. Dr. Marshall Duke at Emory University has 25 questions that are critical in the family heritage. In other words, if your daughter knows where you grew up, where you went to school, your room as a child, who your friends were, as you go through the life cycle, a relationship with, her mother, et cetera, that builds resiliency. It's like the rootedness that is often missing. And that's an identity builder too. And all women and men as well need identity formation that's secure and safe. And you're the caretaker of the family history.
Right.
So that's what builds resiliency, which is necessary when you face issues and big problems.
Okay, I'm going to springboard off of that. I love that you just talked about that family history because I have a story where it has to do with my grandmother. And this is my dad's mom. So when she turned 85 years old, my dad and I flew from Portland, Oregon to Chicago, where we attended her party for her 85th birthday.
Cool.
And here I was in grad school, 1997. I'm learning all about how to do what's called a genogram, which is like a genealogy diagram where you chart the family on this piece of paper. And so I loved that I could put into action the things I was learning. And men are squares. I didn't make it up. Women are circles on this piece of paper.
Come on now.
So I'm drawing this out, and I'm asking my grandma, who had been married 3 times. There had been abuse in the home. There had been extreme poverty. South side of Chicago, a lot of gangs. My dad was in gangs. I mean, she had a pretty rough life.
I would say so.
Even at 12, I think her mom died at 12 and she got married the first time, I think at 15, where you have to get a waiver by your parent.
Yes.
Dad gave her that. Her dad had been in the military, was gone a lot. I mean, a lot of absences. So here I'm filling in this chart, like, what was the name of your first husband or second husband and this, and what age were they when they died? And we got about, halfway through this chart and she just says, honey, why do you want to know this stuff? And I just said, well, because I don't know. Like, you're this living history book and I don't know these stories. They're in you. And she just said, it's just too painful. I can't do this. And I was like, oh, I had never anticipated that telling of the stories would cause an activation of her to feel pain. But here's what I want to say, Ken, is my dad is much the same way. I've asked him to tell me stories before. You know what he said? Why do you want to know this? I said, because I want to know you. So you might be a bit like my dad or my grandma who would say, I don't really want to open up those stories because there's too much pain. So here was an idea that I came up with my dad, is probably 8-9 years ago.
Okay,
we started this tradition.
Now, her dad has a oldest daughter who's a psychologist. So can you imagine being carted around with her? But this is cool.
Right, like I'm always kind of like wanting to dig deeper.
Yes.
I've gone, Dad, do you think we're close enough? He goes, not as close as you'd like us to be. I'm like, yes. So you're right. I'm always reading between the lines, which we do as women anyway. But
yes, you do.
I'm especially, can I say gifted in that?
You are very.
Gifted might not be the word. You might say probing or curious or nudging.
Curious
too
is
hard.
great. Curious
Okay, we'll go
is
with
great.
curious. So I came up with this idea where I said, Dad, on the way home from our Costco Winco trips, we go to this grocery store in our area where I'm a cheap date. My dad would either buy me a salad at Costco or a piece of pizza. I mean, it didn't cost a lot. But we started this tradition of grocery shopping together because neither of us really liked it every Monday night. But I said, Dad, on the way home, about a 10-minute drive, I want you to tell me one story about your life. So my dad struggled to sit down and just open up the vault. But when it was one story, Ken, he could do it.
He could
and
handle
he would
it.
come prepared.
Good for him.
And he would say, okay, it's January, it's wintertime. I want to tell you about when I skated and cut my eye on a blade of a can when I skated across the ice and fell when the lakes froze over there in Chicago. And then he told me stories of his granddad, goofy stories of family history. I'm telling you that you think, this wouldn't happen today and people would get away with things, but he began to open up stories because it was one at a time. So maybe if you're like my dad and you want to teach your daughter how to listen, which means you have to talk, is that you can begin telling her one story about your life that you've never told her for 10 minutes at a time. I guarantee she will love it.
So what I get a picture of is you're out on this date and here in just 10 minutes. So Dad, this isn't going to take a whole evening or a 3-hour conversation. Right. You don't want to share too much. Make small deposits in this resiliency factor, and it builds vulnerability so that when your daughter faces issues, she'll come to you to share like you have shared with her.
Well, I love that you said resiliency and vulnerability that go together because my grandma, I know her story. She has, well, I know some of it, I should say, is she's no longer living, but she endured hardship.
Of course.
I mean, getting married so young and marrying someone a lot older and having children soon. 7 kids. She was a tough woman at the core.
Had to be.
So then I internalized that. Like I come from tough stock, knowing my dad too. South side of Chicago, grew up there, was in gangs from the time he was 12. So rather than him thinking, why would you want to know these stories? You're right. I'm building resilience to go, that's the stock I come from.
Yes. So that you are better able to adjust and be vulnerable yourself. Yep. And so the desire that your daughter has, it may not be verbalized, but I guarantee you it's in her tank. It's in her character. It's in her identity. And you, Dad, can bring that out.
And if you're afraid that you will run out of stories, because my dad literally said to me, he got to a couple of years in, he goes, I don't have any more stories.
Yes,
like
done.
That's it. And I said, tell them to me again. And then you know what I found out?
What? Reruns.
Reruns. But sometimes details would come out that he hadn't told me the first time.
Of course.
So dads, I just wanted to put that in there. Yeah. You are like my dad going, I don't think I have enough stories to keep her occupied or to keep her attentive.
Yeah.
Tell them again. She'll love it.
Okay. So I'm going to read some comments that are very, what I'd say, revealing. The National Center for Fathering did father-daughter conferences all over the United States. We gathered from daughters at a Saturday issues that they wanted to discuss with their dad and the reason why they didn't. I'm going to read the issues. So daughters were separated. We had a great day. Hundreds participated in this in several events. And this is what, on a 3x5 card, I'm going to read you 5 responses. These are real life issues of what daughters wanted to share with their dads. I need to tell him, I know he wasn't faithful to my mother, and that is the reason for their divorce. I know he was dishonest in letting me believe my mom was the fault for the divorce. This daughter, I don't have her age, has been sitting on this likely a long time. Here's another one. I really need to talk to my dad about relationships so he can give me practical advice and tell me where he went wrong and how he learned from his mistakes. Now, mind you, these are daughters writing these down, and we so facilitated this that later in the day, there was opportunity for them to share. Here's 2 more. The issue of living with my boyfriend and not being married. I mean, I don't know how this happened, but this is something that was never discussed. Daddy, I need to know,
Mm,
you to know that I love you and I miss being a young little girl.
mm,
The way we used to be, we talked a lot. Today, we hang out and it has made me smile. And
mm.
lastly, I lie and cheat constantly in school. He thinks I'm the perfect child,
Oh,
but I'm not. So these are
yeah.
things, there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that young women are carrying right
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
that need to be brought out. And Dad, your vulnerability
Yeah.
will help her do just that.
Say more about vulnerability, Ken, because even
Okay.
as we've prepared, we've been having some rich conversations about what that word means.
Okay, this is the victory sign, guys. When you self disclose something that you are going to risk sharing as a way of building a bond, what you do is become more human. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
little girls, when they're little, if you're in a good relationship with them, they think you're the smartest, the
Yeah.
richest, the strongest man on the planet.
Till she hits adolescence, that is. And then
You
she's
got it.
the smartest, the strongest.
Well, and some daughters are that way, but the worthlessness and the peer pressure that Michelle has talked about so succinctly about the mirror and how important that is. She looks in the mirror, what does she see? All her flaws.
Yeah.
You being vulnerable and open appropriately through the life course will be an example of vulnerability that leads to her having courage.
You know, I love that, having courage to be real, to be honest, to be upfront. Because when we as women, it's the same for you as dads, but when we're carrying secrets, we're carrying pain, and we don't release it, that's what leads us to make really stupid decisions, whether it's looking for love
In all
the wrong places, whether it's that,
Yeah.
or we're numbing out the pain and shoving it down with addictions,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Because even though we've talked a lot, even before today, about the importance of, opening up your story to her, being honest, we're not just talking about past failures in vulnerability. We're highlighting today, aren't we, Ken, that this is even about the present.
Yes.
So that in the moment, in
Come
the
on.
present, when you've caused harm,
Yeah.
you've made a mistake in the way
Yes.
you responded, you made it, maybe you blew up at a 10, on a 0 to 10 scale, at a 10 level, when really it merited a 6. That you need to go back and make amends. And what that means is not just, I'm sorry if I hurt you, no ifs.
Yes.
Ifs, ands, or buts. Nope, nope, nope. We've got to say, I'm sorry that I hurt you.
Yes.
Help me understand how I hurt you. Let her talk back. And then you've got to follow it up with, will you forgive me? Not just, I'm sorry I hurt you, but will you forgive me? So you build that bridge and set a foundation for future connection with her.
Right. So what this is, the vulnerability and this openness, it is somewhat revealing some of the past learnings. And so you're building resiliency, connection, but it is the seedbed or the foundation for forgiveness and love.
Yeah.
As you learn, as she, receives, and it works both ways. But it's not just that. Dad, this paves a great road for the future. Do you think your daughter's going to face some big issues in the future? She sure is. You know who she will come to if you're vulnerable. Even now, she may be 30, may have 2 children away. You may need to write a letter or do something, but she will be more open to come and share with you as a fellow pilgrim in this pathway we call life. And the family is strong because of that.
Actually, in the dad's group that I lead, the ABBA Project, I hear that every year, that by the end, when daughters give me feedback, they say, when this started, I would always go to my mom. But because my dad has built this foundation, I'm now going to him first before her. So again, you and I are passionate about this dad-daughter bond.
Oh, it's
so
the best.
Let's go to the second half of what you're going to share. This is more input that he has from daughters who wanted to then at this summit say what blocked them from sharing more honestly with their dad.
Okay, so remember the one about, I know that you were unfaithful to mom.
Yeah.
The reason she doesn't want to share it is, I don't feel like dealing with this issue because it would bring on more problems. Now, she's just measuring, does she have capacity for that? But she doesn't share it because she sees an avalanche possibly coming. Here is the other. One of the daughters said, I don't want to share because I'm kind of scared about his response. I don't want a negative one. I need positive feedback, love, support, and it scares me that if I go to him, I will feel worse and maybe more confused than if I never told him. Here's another. This is the one living with her boyfriend. My dad will likely put his spiritual religious views and shove them off on me, and it will turn into a guilt trip. And the one about lying and cheating, my dad will probably now judge me differently or tell my entire family, and I don't want to be viewed as the bad girl or person. That's the reason many of them have not shared.
And maybe if you're a dad that doesn't have your daughter opening up to you and you don't know why, hearing some of these other responses from other daughters other than your own might have you be more open tonight and today or whenever you're listening to saying, maybe that's why my daughter isn't opening up with me. And if she isn't, I would encourage you to ask someone else in your family, her mom, your sister, coworker, like someone or a sibling. Do you know, again, not that you're triangulating, but saying, or go directly to her. What would it take for you to open up more with me? I think that's the best. But if she won't, you might need to go around the block a little bit. Well, before we kind of land this plane, I know that a lot of what we've talked about tonight, Ken, we're like, don't block her. Don't do this. Don't do that. We want to end positively. Yeah, we're talking about be vulnerable, be real, be authentic, be open. We want to encourage you here at the end by telling you a story. And this one just came up this year, Ken, with
this is really good.
One of my nephews got married a year ago to this precious gal named Grace. She's 20 years old. They got married really young in the middle of college, and she's darling. And we were having dinner a few months ago, and I had never, I'm just getting to know her. I'd never seen that on her wrist. She had a tattoo that says Goose. And I just, again, really unusual. It wasn't one of those that you go in and just have stamped on. I was like,
the Top Gun Goose? Navigator.
Yeah, what does Goose mean? Yeah, good point. And I asked her, and she just lit up, and she said, I got this from my dad. He calls me this, and he's been calling me Goose since the day I was born. And just seeing her face light up, I was like, well, tell me about your relationship with your dad. There's more to this. And she said, I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers. And she said, my dad and I were like this. Wow. My dad and I are so close. Well, I wanted to interview her in prep for a radio program I was doing on dad-daughter bonding. And I said, can I interview you? She said, absolutely. She said, in fact, after the interview, she said, just opening up these stories. I'm going to call my dad when we hang up because I'm loving my dad even more. Yeah, just telling these stories again. Back to that resilience that you see when daughters even recall stories about their dad. So here's what she said when I asked her the question, tell me about ways that your dad connects with you at a heart level. She said, not a lot of young women that I know have special relationships with their dad. I mean, how sad is that, right? She said, a lot of my girlfriends would see me snuggle with my dad or ask him to fix my car, or she would ask him to go on a coffee date, not the other way around. And she said, and most of my girlfriends never had that kind of a relationship with their dad. So she's talking probably mostly about high school and some college friends. She said, listen to this. One thing that has brought us closer is how vulnerable my dad has been with me throughout my life.
Wow.
The key word of tonight, victory or vulnerability.
Right.
We didn't even plan that one. I love that. Victory. How you get to victory, how do you lead a connection with your daughter? It's got to be vulnerable. She went on to say, my dad has been really open about struggles he's gone through, especially in early adulthood. He's been really real with me. I don't feel like I'm being sheltered. My family has been a church planting family for as long as I can remember, and there are a lot of struggles that have come with that, financially, relationally, with leadership, etc. She said, but because our family has maintained good relationships with each other through the hard times, it's been easier to connect with each other even in the good times, since there's not a lot of other people who get it. So look, it's not just that it was always good, but that they stayed connected as a family of five because dad led the way in keeping the conversations open. Even with financial struggles, which again, as Ken said earlier, you've got to keep it age appropriate.
Yeah.
She went on to say, we've had a lot of conversations about all of this, and it helped us come out of it a lot better because we talked openly. There was so much joy and camaraderie in our family through the good and the bad. My dad has been open and humble. I love those two words, about his shortcomings, and listen to this, dads, about what he's learning and discovering, which led me to say, it sounds like your dad has been open with you about his process, not just his problems. She said, exactly. He hasn't put a weight on me that's weighed me down, but he's opened up about what he's learned through the process. The last thing she said was, my dad has been a huge mentor in my life. And because he shares things he's learning, I feel like I can share where I'm growing and where I messed up. So if you want to follow in the footsteps of Grace's dad, Mike,
yes,
I would encourage you to open up a bit more than maybe you ever have before after listening to this, and share one vulnerable story with your daughter about your life. I guarantee it'll build a bridge to her heart.
And I just want to say, those questions are in this book. Why don't we close just reading a couple of the questions?
Okay.
And all we need to do is not have a 3-hour discussion with your daughter, but just move the
needle just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah. And I was just thinking, move the heart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
See, that's what I get for trying to fill in that gap.
Right.
But you're right, it moves the heart.
Yes, just
and
a
that's
little
really
bit.
what we're about.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question, Dad. If you want to put this into action right now, today, you can tell your daughter that she has permission to ask you these two questions. One is, Dad, what is one of the most stupid things you've ever done that you don't want me to repeat?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Jump off a bridge.
You know what? You love jumping off bridges.
I have.
Whenever we drive over one, he will assess
water underneath.
Yeah, as to whether or not he could jump off of that. I'm like, tell me the stories. I want to hear them.
Yes.
Got that? So you let her ask you, Dad, what is one of the most stupid things you've ever done that you don't want me to repeat? Number one. Number two, what, Dad, is something you've had to learn the hard way that no one ever told you? What's one thing that you've had to learn the hard way that no one ever told you? So those are a couple conversation starters if you want to lead your daughter to listen, which means she's going to listen to you talk, because that's how she's going to learn interpersonal strengthening skills, really, I believe, to build a bridge between the two of you. So let's just review, Ken, as we wrap up this series that we've done from my book, Let's Talk, Conversation Starters. You've learned how to lead your daughter to laugh, lead her to love herself so that out of that she can love others. You led her, and you want to keep leading her to look deeper at things that have hurt her that she's holding in so she can get them out. Lead her to lament. We spent a couple weeks on that one. And then the last one today, lead her to listen. So we have loved doing the series with you so much that we want to tell you our big news.
Okay, so you have the essence of the best practical advice that I know of about father-daughter bonding and relationships. This is available. You can get that.
Go to my website, drmichellewatson.com. It's right there. And a lot of National Center for Fathering resources are there as well.
That's right. Many articles that Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield has written are on fathers.com, but there's more. We're not going to stop because I believe there is a great awakening coming.
Yeah. Because
the hearts of fathers are really being turned toward their daughters in this case.
Yeah.
You may be a mother, you may be a grandmother, and you may, resonate with many of these things. I was talking to a mother this morning who purchased the book. She's the principal of a large school. And she said, this has been so helpful. I said, Sandra, you got the book. I'm reading it myself because it helps me. But I want my husband to be the best dad he can be. This is a great gift. So we're not going to stop here. We're going to move forward because this father-daughter bond is something that we need to strengthen here in the good old USA. And so for the next weeks, we're just going to continue providing research practical tips based on a mountain of work that has been done with Michelle and with the National Center for Fathering. So we're here for you, dads.
Yes.
We really believe you're a difference maker.
Yeah, you are. So 5 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday for a while. We're just going to keep this going until we sense we need to do something different, but we love meeting with you here, and we want to champion you as dads in every way that we can.
We sure do. Okay.
Yeah, it's been great to be with you. Thanks for spending time.
Go dads.
Go dads.
See you next week.